did we see? Fast forward to 1999, we get a phone call from Jose Juan telling us that Midland was looking to hire a biology teacher and a ranch manager. We were interested in returning to Midland, and although this was a big decision to give up the permanent job with the Forest Service, we were offered the job here and we came back. And so in '99, Ben began his odyssey as ranch manager. And I'm thinking, this ranch management thing might be a bumpy job transition. It's not like I had ever observed Ben, secretly cultivating plants in our backyard, Montana, wanting to be a cowboy or anything like that. But watching Ben jump into this position was inspiring. Growing up at Midland, going to school here, taught him to do things, physical things, but understanding the farm's ins and outs presented a steep learning curve. In his early farm days, with help from many others, Ben learned how to do many things and simultaneously teach students to do the same things as well. He learned to plow with donated draft horses because the school didn't have a tractor. He learned to plant correctly, weed endless rows of lettuce and carrots, move irrigation pipe back and forth, set drip tape, repair drip tape because every animal on the farm chews through drip tape, stake and tie up tomatoes, hide watermelons underneath crates so that the coyotes and raccoons couldn't get them or find them. And my favorite was making a hay bale structure for the thousands of pounds of butternut squash he grew to keep it out of the weather and away from the squirrels, and he and Katie called it Fort Butternut. It was really hard to get him out of the bottom, like he'd fall in. Work on a farm means fixing things all the time. It's a never-ending cycle of staying ahead of the next chore and requires a temperament of being willing to work almost every day, all year. And then a few years after getting a handle on farm responsibilities, he explored a way to start a successful small steer operation whereby Midland raises our own beef for consumption. And this was possible with the generous support of Pam Doran and Nick Alexander. He restructured the cattle lease for the bulk of the property and created distinct pastures, and as BG said, creating many miles of fencing. Ben's learned to build soil on the farm for cover crops, with cover crops, leftover debris from the pig pen, and lots of compost. And he uses rotational grazing to increase the native grass population on the rest of the property. If you know what purple needlegrass looks like, you can see in many of the fields now that were kind of grazed down to the nubs, the purple needlegrass is coming back, and it's really good to see. Any Midland 101 or ConAg student can tell you about these techniques. Ben possesses the qualities of a lifelong learner, a trait that we hope to inspire in our students. He didn't reinvent himself when he returned to Midland to run the ranch, and he deepened his area of interest in the property and cultivated his own growth by learning new things. In those early years of running the farm and ranch, he followed a path of trial and error, asked for and received advice from many others, and I see Jacob Grant out there somewhere, and he was a huge help to Ben in the beginning. And he remains genuinely interested in what this land can do and teach us. So who is this person? Besides changing professions midstream, from surveying wild and rugged mountains to providing food for Stillman, Ben is definitely a blend of his parents, just like all his siblings. He connects with people easily and gets to know their heart and soul. He has a disarming way with everyone he meets, and it always amazes me how he can keep a conversation going at the dinner table in Stillman with any group of students. And those faculty that have been here, and students may know that's not an easy feat. He's a consummate teacher. We all know he's an easy grader. But I mean, teaching kids how to work, do real work, grow the food we depend on, move cattle, fix fence, repair those strange attachments to the tractor. These are not typical skills that most teenagers acquire in high school. Like his father, Carl, Ben also has a soft spot for the Midland Flyer. Many of you know what that is, but some of you don't. It's a student considered a possible risk when it comes to Midland. Ben connects easily with almost all the students, but particularly with the Flyers, and he has consistently rallied support for these students. There have been multiple kids make it through Midland because Ben went to bat for them, and they go on to be perfectly well-adjusted members of society. They just needed someone to champion their route through Midland. We don't all peak in high school. Ben cares about doing a job all the way through. And just the other night, at the beginning of this term, Joanne and BG and Ben and I answered questions from the students and faculty And I believe Tilley asked him what advice for seniors did he have. And he was telling them, like, his mother, Kathy, gave a great speech for Louise's graduation in 1980 about Midland makes you care. And he was basically saying, if I can paraphrase, that sometime next year you seniors are going to turn around and you're going to wonder where your crew is. You know, you're going to care for people and they're not there for you to care for. And so I think Midland will make you realize, you know, caring is a good thing. It gives you a sense of belonging and self-worth. And then after Carlos Ortiz, Sherman Herrick, and Chris Lauer moved on, Ben and BG inherited the job of fixing lots of things at Midland. Like when someone's water's out, we get a phone call, I don't have any water. I'm sort of like, okay, someone's got to go check the well. Or a fence or a gate is broken. Or, here's my favorite, there's a cow looking at me through my window. Or we had a cow on the soccer field before a big lacrosse game. And, you know, the standard spring, there's a rattlesnake in my yard. So Ben gets a call and figures out what to do, day on or day off. He just goes and does it. And not one to dominate faculty discussions, but always ready to sum up some point with a farm reference. Ben remarked a few years ago while we were discussing the age-old question, what does a four-year Midland graduate look like? With all due respect, he compared the Midland educational model to a compost pile. All these different layers of things, information, go into the pile. You mix that along with the right amount of air and water, which is guidance from teachers, coaches, peers, and the lab system. And in time, 4 years, the end product is richer than what you started with. A transformative event has occurred. So I see Ben's time here like a compost pile. His layers or contributions to the pile include a diverse array, some of which have been noted: motorcycle rider, hiker, athlete, musician, archaeologist, trail builder, patient teacher, more patient than me, Forest Service employee, farmer, rancher, father, husband, fixer, and troubleshooter of tractors, fences, water pipes, cisterns, well pumps. He's a cattle wrestler, soil builder, and an all-around good guy. His compost pile is teeming with life, just like a real compost pile. Compost is gold, and everything it comes in contact with grows bigger and better, and that's what Ben has brought to Midland, taking everyday ordinary things and transforming them into rich possibilities. So now I'm going to give this over to Tom.
I can't possibly begin to do more than add a little bit to the pile. But I'm going to do that on the basis of the fact that now that you've heard the praise and the jokes and the impressions, before you hear from the man himself, it's my job to fill in a few facts. I lay claim to that privilege because, along with Eric Swain and one or two other people who are here today, I've known Ben, other than his sisters and his brother, the longest of anybody here, since he was 18 months old. He was digging in the dirt even then, as has been noted, and it's kept right on. As you know, he grew up exploring every inch of Midland's property. As you know, he graduated from Midland. His fix-it days started, I believe, when he was very young, including, I am told, we'll ask him later to show it, that he still carries his union card from his time as a hero, a Midland student fixer of stuff. Get out your wallet. He is a part of this place. That's why it made sense in 1999 when Dan Kunkel, then head of school, brought Ben and Lori back from a previous engagement at Midland, and Ben was charged with managing this property as ranch manager and with establishing what had been a pretty struggling garden operation into the Midland School farm. And all the things that BG talked about that go into that are important. The fact that the farm was certified as organic or recertified as organic in 2013 is important. Most important is that is one of the places Midland students learn the connection between work and results, because they're eating the results. Ben's work has also directly affected how Midland looks and how it functions as part of an ecosystem, as well as providing climate benefits. For example, where no stable bank stood alongside campus waterways, Ben and his students have built creek banks lined with sycamores, alders, and willows. And in a region where groundwater availability is already a concern, even before the drought, this investment pays dividends now and for years to come. Under Ben's leadership, Midland actively manages soils to increase carbon content and water holding capacity. Midland's grass-fed beef are raised here, and management practices such as rotational grazing and cover cropping support our physical environment, while the planting of hedgerows and improving wildlife habitats help us as well. But Ben doesn't work alone or just with students. Ben has led Midland in partnership with a number of organizations. The Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, Veggie Rescue, Nature Tracks, and the Santa Barbara County Trails Council, among others. In fact, the Santa Barbara County Trails Council gave Ben an environmental award in March of 2013 for his work creating new opportunities for hikers, trail runners, and equestrians. Ben also established a relationship with local landscaper Greg Donovan, which helped create native hedgerows in the garden and farm and attract beneficial insects, and that in turn has led to work with the Xerxes Foundation and Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Ben has also served on the board of directors of the Santa Ynez Valley Natural History Association, and very importantly, he was a key member of the Committee of Midland Trustees and Advisors who worked with the Trust for Public Land and the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County to create our conservation easement, which protects Midland's land from development in perpetuity. Meanwhile, as you've heard back in the classroom, Ben and Lori have continued to develop Midland 101 into an integral part of the Midland curriculum. Don't just take my word for it, or the people. Ben selected the speakers, by the way, so these are all paid advertisements. Don't take their word for it. In a recent article written about Ben on the California Climate and Agricultural Network website, the author, Drew Marion, says, "All in all, it seems clear that Munger has brought the school to the front lines of innovative and climate-conscious farm management. Perhaps even more importantly, he has created a space in which young people, so often removed from the practical aspects of what it means to use resources and land responsibly, can participate in real-world projects that truly engage with the challenges and opportunities for land stewardship." These combined experiences and everything you've heard about typify Ben's deep connection to the land, the program, and the soul of Midland School as he humbly embodies the Midland mission and philosophy. Therefore, it is with great respect and appreciation that the Midland Alumni Association, the Board of Trustees, and Head of School Will Graham join me to honor Ben Munger with the 2015 John Dreyfus Distinguished Alumnus Award.
Students, in these words, which you can tune out, there are 4 of my poems. They're biographical and in chronological order. You could just listen to those if you want. The history of conservation in the American West is a transition from placing people outside of nature to placing people within it. This has been my journey from the 1970s to the 2000s. In the 1970s, wilderness to me was a measured distance from people, 10 miles from the trailhead, past the last camp where the trail narrows, and I was not satisfied until I was as far out as I could get. But ironically, I was always interested in looking for the past peoples who had been there before. Just saying the name San Rafael Wilderness meant far from people, and I bit hard on the critical mistake of thinking that the absence of people meant you were in real nature. This is what we were implicitly taught and marketed by the backpacking industry in the 1970s. Because we had the ability to hike and carry our stuff there, it was essentially ours. The past was the past and did not connect us in any meaningful way other than a wilderness experience. I always wanted to work on the Moose Creek Ranger District of the Nez Perce National Forest, an all-wilderness district. People who worked there were assigned Norman Maclean's A River Runs Through It as required reading. I worked in the next ranger district over that tried to sell timber in the early 1990s. My Forest Service career goals were to get a permanent job, then somehow end up as a lookout, a budding contradiction. At this time, I read and reread Aldo Leopold's A Sand County Almanac. Jack Ward Thomas was the chief of the Forest Service, and Leopold's conservation ethic became the rallying cry of a new mission in the agency that was going to focus on ecosystem services rather than board feet of lumber. But Smokey the Bear still puts fires out. Here comes the big yellow Pulaski. Dennis Havig was growling on the radio, "Hurry up and get there. Stop first at the ranger station and power wash the grousers and undercarriage. Knapweed is worse than fire." Dozer operator had never been to a fire from a construction job in Dillon, off to the big hole in the Bitterroot Mountains. Havig is still yelling, and we are on the way up the logging road. But the 3-axle trailer gets stuck on a curve. We have to unload the D6 and push the trailer around the corner. Now Mark Bertroni is on the radio, and we make it. Unload and clank to the fire on the edge of an older clear cut. Dead and live trees falling as we carve along the edge of the fire. I didn't know that there had been a fist fight earlier between hotshot crews. Hostility boiled in a nest where the saws were buzzing. The superintendent of the Helena Hotshots walks towards me and he sneers, "Here comes the big yellow Pulaski." That was the summer of 1998, and the next summer I was back at Midland and about to read William Cronin's essay, The Trouble with Wilderness, while burning piles of wood in Trash Canyon. For the first time, I found myself defined by my own culture, rooted earlier in European thought, but expressed in the 1970s, that wilderness was the best antidote to our human selves, a refuge we must somehow recover if we expect to save the planet. Yet Cronin pointed out that wilderness was a reflection of our own unexamined human longings and desires, created sublime landscapes where we wanted to glimpse the face of God, constructed of romantic carried thought, and of a frontier myth where wilderness represents national renewal, simpler and vigorous times. A source of American character and democracy. What, was I wrong all along? Was wilderness a European and an American idea to define my youth? They really did not aid in our pressing problems with nature. Was it making it worse? Why had we excluded people from our definition of real nature? In the late summer of 1999, we did a prescribed burn at Midland along with the Spalding Ranch. Yes, we were type converting freshmen, but coastal sage scrub pretty much replaced coastal sage scrub, so don't worry. There was a teacher here at this time who had aspirations of running the school and probably more than that. She said, "That's what we need to do, is burn everything out and start over," referring to Midland School. Yikes, that's not what I was thinking. And didn't she know that this landscape is adapted to fire with a 30-year fire return interval? Basically being, if it's not broke, don't fix it types, both Lori and I took a conservative approach to a time of rapid changes. Fingernails dug in, things got worse. Then they got better. I kept thinking. If I can do as well as Sherman, Chris, David, and Alan Russell, everything would be all right. Second. The things I've cleaned up along Figueroa Mountain: star thistle, couches, stoves, tires, dead pigs, 2 heads and 9 feet didn't add up, all dumped together. Hypodermic needles, human feces, endless beer bottles, a camper shell. Derek Harwell got that one. How do you define the pragmatic middle ground between extremes? One was the act of not abandoning Midland school culture at this time in the early 2000s. Kind of digging in and finding out what our unfair advantage was. For me and Lori, it was the land. The land was a teaching opportunity to be explored, and stewardship of the natural and cultural resources was the top of my list. Slowly we built knowledge and ranch and farm infrastructure like fences and water, protecting critical springs like Pistol Holly and Red Rock. We made 4 cattle pastures of the property where there had been only 1. The list goes on: land grazing systems, active restoration of degraded riparian zones, conservation of open spaces, implementation of organic farming with minimal tillage, and management of the land for long-term resilience. We were not changing our ethics. It was about learning and gaining knowledge and doing. We still believed in needs, not wants, but we learned that organic matter in the soil was important also. Essentially, it was about leaving a place better than you found it. And thank you, Ben Rich, which I understand better than the difficult accounting of needs versus wants. Burned fence lines. Burned fence lines, ancient barbed wire grown through live oaks, using recycled redwood posts was my favorite. Now 2x2 hardwood grape stakes, first used in 1975 by the Sanford Winery, are my favorite. Bear tracks in Adobe Creek. Someone saw a lion. It was near where Ralph dragged a dead steer. Physically and ecologically, Midland is in between 2 extremes: the Sedgwick Preserve, where cattle are not welcome, and the Chamberlain Ranch, where grass is not welcome unless eaten by cattle. We had to find ourselves in the middle somewhere with land management. We found a place that has been referred to as the Radical Center, a term created by Bill McDonald, one of the founders of the Malphite Borderlands Group. The Radical Center is really about working, partnerships, trust, and action, and it is not a physical place or an attempt to save ranching culture. It is more about the promotion of agrarianism, that people everywhere are part of the land community, just as dependent as other life on the land's fertility and just as shaped by its mysteries and possibilities. The Radical Center brings Leopold's conservation ethic back into focus and challenges us to treat soil and water with the same ethic we extend to humans. But our culture has a big problem with the land ethic, because it is somehow at odds in our minds with our desire for profit from the land and the economics of capitalism. The Radical Center is as simple as our ability to say thank you to soil, animals, and plants in our graces before dinner at Stillman Hall. We do happen to be close to the animals and the plants we eat and the soil that supports them, and it is acknowledged every week at sit-down meals. If the Radical Center is a process, then it places people directly in the middle of that process. Jim Corbett, part of the foundation of the Malphite Group, said, "For us humans to be at home in the wildlands, we must accept and share life as a gift that is unearned and unowned." When we cease to work at taming the creation and learn to accept life as a gift, a way opens up for us to become active participants in an ancient exodus out of idolatry and bondage, a pilgrimage that continues to be conceived and born in the wilderness. In this sense, communion, the radical center, is always here and now rather than an end state. Aldo Leopold said, the important thing is not to achieve harmony, but to strive. And strive we have. Lisi with Oak Restoration and Solar Energy, Marguerite and Will with their tireless work and support of the farm and ranch, BG, Gloria, and Emily for their willingness to cook with more prep time, experimentation with frozen tomatoes and peppers and meat, and their willingness to plan menus around what we can produce. Nick Alexander and Pam Doran for being generous allies in the process of making conservation and farming and ranching work. Lori's work at defending riparian zones along Alamo Pintado were always steadfast and resolute, and she is resilient by definition. Katie Isaacson Hames is from the same tribe, striving to combine ranching and conservation for years at her family's ranch near Lompo, knowing that it is not an easy path to walk, but it is the right one. And Greg Donovan, our partner on the farm, who in my mind always seeks the truth in what Leopold referred to when he said, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the stability, integrity, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. This is not something you can learn in school, but you can become certain of it with a lifetime of work. We're a strong community of teachers, staff, and students that strive to do the hard work of achieving harmony, coexistence, resilience, and stewardship, a place for people in nature, not outside of it. Wendell Berry said, making a home in nature is the forever unfinished life work of our species. The ditch. Digging in the trench close to the end, slowing down the shovel and back, beginning to see the end, and the shovel doesn't work that well in moving dirt. Too close to the sky, want to keep the head down. Head up and I can't look over the lip of the ditch without some fear. Why? Isn't it just another ditch to start digging? I am an advocate of wilderness. It is the place I want to be, and I know that us humans have a place there if we want. Or is it a need? Thank you.
Part of my job I sometimes like the least is having to have the last word. Thank you, Ben. I'm going to miss you so much. But I think it's great for the parents here to know that you've enrolled in a place where we're going to throw your kid in a compost pile. I'm going to take those words to heart. I'm going to start saying them a lot. We're going to sell that. That's right where you want to be, in that compost pile. With these adults. Thank you all. After being hired in February of '06, Marguerite and I came back that May for the junior leadership camping retreat. And we found out that we were going to have to share a platform tent with Ben and Laurie. We didn't know Ben and Laurie. Those were close quarters. We had this sense that this place was putting their eyes on us and watch. And we needed help, and it was their job to keep an eye on us. And that was a little close, but it worked out. When we arrived in the fall, they continued the vigil. We hiked with them in the Golden Trout Wilderness, in the backcountry, its arcane deck. And Ben and I rode this property on horses one day, and it's a highlight of my time here. Over the years, we've had countless conversations about kids. This incredible property and the integration of the natural and human resources that continue to shape and inform Midland's unique and evolving place-based educational model. As scientists, naturalists, teachers, and people, Ben and Lori are simply rock, Lori, solid, and their fingerprints are all over this place. Ben has put his stakes in the ground in the garden and brought the farm ever closer to the kitchen. For this and so much more, the Grahams and Midland School are appreciative, thankful, forever grateful for all that Ben is and all that he does. In recognition of individuals who've gone above and beyond that which was asked of them, and in service to the school, Midland's founder, Paul Squibb, awarded the Midland Medal. It was designed by Louise Grimes in the mid-1930s. She was the cook, clothing mender, and student transporter. The Midland Medal is awarded sparingly and with great cause. For his dedication and distinguished service to Midland School, for his love of the property, for his care of the critters and people who inhabit this place, it is my privilege, honor, and distinct pleasure to award the Midland Medal to Ben Munger. Everybody take a deep breath. Thank you so much. Started on Friday. Actually started Thursday night. It's continued. Thank you to every person who participated, helped. And while I have this labor force here, anybody sitting on a bench, we'll bring that into Stillman and put it back. We'll stack those white chairs in the pole barn. We'll be back to normal, whatever that is. And parents, sign out. Your children are going out this afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. I think we'll have lunch, and we'll need a little help just cleaning this all up. Enjoy this very special day. Thank you so much.